What we're going to make today is this beautiful card with the watercolor background made with our Night in Bethlehem stamp set and Bethlehem edgelets dies. I made a similar card to this a few years ago with a set that Stampin' Up! Had, and people just absolutely went crazy over it. And I thought this set would be a really neat one to make the card again with. So let's get started. What you will need for this is a 4.5 by 8.5 Night of Navy card base folded in half. You will need 2 pieces of Whisper White cardstock that measure 4 by 5.25. I have already put one of them inside with the greeting stamped on it with Night of Navy. And you will need a piece of watercolor paper that measures 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. So we are going to start with this watercolor paper. And you are going to need a size F block, acrylic block, a Stampin' Pierce mat, and what you want to do is put a piece of scrap paper on top of your Stampin' Pierce mat. We are going to put the color onto this watercolor paper with this block, and you need some cushion underneath, which is why you need to put that Stampin' Pierce mat down there. So to put the color on your block, we're using 3 colors of ink: Marina Mist, Island Indigo, Night of Navy. And what we want is darker color at the top. I'll show you our finished product. Darker color at the top and lighter color at the bottom. So we're actually going to start inking with the lighter color, Marina Mist. And just press your ink pad directly to the block. And you want to cover about half of that block with Marina Mist. And flip it around. And cover about the other half with Island Indigo. And then with your Night of Navy, you are going to cover up some of what you just did with that indigo. And do maybe about the top inch or so. Now, we are going to spritz this with Stampin' Spritzer, just with some plain water in it. And we want to spritz it enough times that, I'm going to move this for a second, spritz it enough times that the colors start to bleed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I just used 15. You can use more, you can use less. You can play around with this some and see what works for you. We'll bring that watercolor paper back. We want to flip it over pretty fast and press down. And you want to press down until you don't see any white spots on that watercolor paper. So if you still have white spots, you probably didn't use quite enough water. But it is no problem at all, because once you remove this from the block, what you can do is just spritz a little bit more water on there and the color should bleed. And we actually spritz some more water on here anyway. Now, to get these really cool speckles in the background, we are going to sprinkle salt on this. You can use some kind of larger salt grains. I just have cheapy salt from the dollar store. And what this does, it pulls some of that ink out and it pulls some of the color out, so you'll get the lighter splotches. For this to work very well, we need to have plenty of water there. So I'm going to spritz just a couple more times. Now I am going to set all of this aside. And bring in my one that I've already prepared that is nice and dry. And what we're going to do is emboss this Rejoicing in Christ greeting. I love this stamp set, the Night in Bethlehem stamp set. It has really neat greetings. Rejoicing in Christ, blessed Christmas wishes, and then the one on the inside that says, wishing you a season of joy as we remember the night when love came down to earth and became our song of celebration. I really like religious sets like these because, as hopefully you know, that is the reason for this season. So I'm going to ink this Rejoicing in Christ stamp with Versamark. Before I stamp, I'm going to quickly use my embossing buddy in the top corner. You want to make sure this is 100% completely dry before you're doing this. Use your embossing buddy, stamp firmly. Sprinkle white embossing powder over. That actually worked out really well. Better than the first couple times I did this. The first couple times I had some extra embossing powder stuck, and what you can do is just take a fine tip paintbrush and try to knock that extra off before you actually emboss it. Okay, now I'll use my heat tool to heat this up until that powder melts. Okay. Now I want to attach this to the 4x5¼ piece of white cardstock. You want to use something really strong, either Fast Fuse or Tear and Tape adhesive. Fast Fuse is my favorite. And you want to use plenty of it. The watercolor paper, especially if yours is nice and warped or bowed, you need some strong adhesive to hold it to your cardstock. The downfall is you need to make sure this is exactly where you want it before you press it down, because once you stick it, it will not come back up. And I guess we can go ahead and put this on the front of your card base. Now, to get the dies from the Bethlehem Edgelets die set, I cut them out of our beautiful Dazzling Diamonds glimmer paper, this white glimmer paper. And when you're cutting with dies and glimmer paper, it's best to flip it over so the glitter side is down and put your dies on top of that. It helps it cut through a little bit better. I ran it through a couple of different times just to make sure it was all cut, and it did cut very easily. So here they are. I cut one of each of the building scenes and then one of the stars. And I have put dimensionals on the back already. You want to use more dimensionals versus less dimensionals just to make sure this all gets stuck down really well. Since we're using the top layer will be on top of glimmer paper, and the glimmer paper is a little bit tricky to get things to stick to. So use plenty of dimensionals. So you'll stick this down so that there is a little bit of a blue border still showing at the bottom and on each side. Right about there. Press that down well. The second one, a smaller one, will line up right at that same bottom edge. And press it down. And then we'll add our finishing touch, which is this beautiful star. I just think these are absolutely beautiful, and like I said last time I made a card similar to this, people went crazy. I hope you can make some of these for your Christmas cards this year. What's great is, I mean, they're absolutely beautiful. Each one is unique, and they really don't take that long to make. If you set up an assembly line with your block to ink it and then ink the watercolor paper, it really would not take a whole lot of time to make quite a few of these. One thing I will show you before we finish real quick. Here is a similar one I made that I framed that I'm going to use as a gift for someone with a matching card. This is a 5x7 frame, and I just had to extend the measurements just a little bit. I cut one of each of these dies plus a little short piece that I added just beside it to make it long enough for this. So there you go.